The screech of twisted metal echoed through the morning air as Major Riley Shaw's helicopter circled the devastation below. What should have been a routine training facility now looked like a war zone. Concrete slabs jutted at impossible angles, steel beams protruded like broken bones, and dust still hung in the air from the collapse. Shaw had seen combat zones that looked better than this. Her orders were simple: recover the bodies and secure the evidence. But as she prepared to land, something about this accident didn't feel right. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Major Riley Shaw wiped her hands on the oil-stained rag and stepped back from her helicopter. The Black Hawk looked good, every bolt checked, every fluid level perfect. She'd been flying for 12 years, and the pre-flight ritual still mattered. Her crew chief, Sergeant Mills, nodded his approval from across the hangar. "She's ready for whatever comes next, ma'am," Mills said, closing the engine compartment. Riley smiled. "She always is." The morning sun streamed through the hangar doors, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Fort Braxton hummed with its usual activity, trucks rolling past, soldiers jogging in formation, the distant sound of another helicopter taking off. Riley loved this time of day. Everything felt possible before the radio started crackling with emergencies. As if summoned by her thoughts, her radio chirped. "Major Shaw, report to operations immediately." The voice belonged to Colonel Martinez, her commanding officer. His tone was all business. Riley clipped the radio back to her belt. "Mills, button her up. Looks like we've got work." The operations building sat at the heart of the base, its windows reflecting the morning light. Riley jogged up the steps, her boots echoing in the hallway. She knocked once on Martinez's door and entered. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Colonel Martinez looked up from a stack of papers, his weathered face serious. Behind him stood Captain Jennifer Hayes from Intelligence, her arms crossed, studying a tablet. "Shaw, we've got a situation." Martinez gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Training accident at the urban warfare facility. Building collapse during exercises." Riley sat down, already calculating flight time and equipment needs. "How many casualties, sir?" "That's what we need you to find out." Hayes stepped forward, her voice crisp. "At 0600 hours, Building 7 collapsed during a simulated urban combat exercise. We lost contact with the training team inside." "Lost contact?" Riley frowned. "What about emergency beacons? Personal locators?" Martinez and Hayes exchanged a glance. Something passed between them that Riley couldn't read. "The collapse was extensive," Martinez said carefully. "Structural engineers believe the building's foundation gave way. Old construction, probably compromised by years of training exercises." Riley leaned forward. "Sir, what exactly are you asking me to do?" Hayes consulted her tablet. "Your mission is body recovery and evidence preservation. The site needs to be secured for the investigation. You'll transport the remains to the medical facility and ensure all equipment and classified materials are properly handled." The words hit Riley like cold water. Body recovery. Not search and rescue. Not emergency medical evacuation. They'd already written off whoever was inside. "How many personnel were in the building?" Riley asked. "3 confirmed," Hayes replied quickly. "Sergeant Martinez, Corporal Johnson, and Private Williams. All from the 82nd Airborne's training cadre." Riley studied their faces. Martinez wouldn't meet her eyes. Hayes kept checking her tablet like it held secrets. "When did this happen?" "About 2 hours ago," Martinez said. "We wanted to assess the situation before sending in recovery teams." 2 hours. Riley's jaw tightened. In her experience, the first 2 hours after any incident were critical. People could survive building collapses. She'd seen it overseas, soldiers pulled from rubble days after bombings, injured but alive. "Sir, shouldn't we be sending search and rescue first? Emergency medical teams?" Hayes stepped closer. Major, the structural engineers have declared the site too unstable for rescue operations. Any additional weight or vibration could cause a secondary collapse. We need someone with your precision flying skills to perform a careful recovery operation. Riley stood up. Something about this felt wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Orders were orders. What equipment am I authorized to take? Standard recovery gear, Martinez said. Body bags, evidence containers, camera equipment for documentation. Keep it light, the building is barely standing. Riley nodded. I'll need about 30 minutes to prep and file a flight plan. Shaw. Martinez's voice stopped her at the door. This is a tough one. Those boys were good soldiers. Their families deserve to have them brought home properly. Yes, sir. I understand. Riley walked back to the hangar, her mind churning. The whole briefing felt rehearsed, like they'd practiced their answers. And why wasn't the fire department involved? Emergency management? A building collapse should have triggered multiple response teams. Mills looked up as she approached the helicopter. What's the mission, ma'am? Body recovery. Urban warfare facility. Riley began checking her equipment inventory. Load the standard recovery gear. And Mills, add the portable radio equipment and emergency medical supplies. Medical supplies? For a recovery? Riley paused, her hands on the equipment locker. Better to have them and not need them. 20 minutes later, Riley was airborne, Fort Braxton shrinking behind her. The flight to the urban warfare facility would take 40 minutes. She used the time to review what she knew and what didn't make sense. The facility came into view ahead, a cluster of concrete buildings designed to simulate city combat environments. Even from a distance, she could see the problem. Building 7 hadn't just collapsed. It looked like it had been hit by an earthquake. Riley keyed her radio. Operations, this is Angel 1 approaching the site. I can see the damage from here. It's worse than the photos suggested. Static crackled before Martinez's voice came through. Copy, Angel 1. Remember, this is a recovery operation only. Do not attempt any rescue procedures. Riley circled the building, studying the destruction from above. Concrete slabs lay at crazy angles. Steel support beams twisted like pretzels. But something caught her eye, the way the debris had fallen, the pattern of destruction. This didn't look like a foundation failure. As she prepared to land, one thought kept nagging at her. If this happened 2 hours ago, why was there no other response team on site? No fire trucks, no ambulances, no investigators. Just her, a helicopter, and orders to collect bodies from a building that looked like a bomb had gone off inside it. Riley set the Black Hawk down in the designated landing zone, shut down the engines, and grabbed her gear. Whatever had really happened here, she was about to find out. The dust still hung in the air as Riley approached the wreckage, but what she would discover in the next few minutes would change everything about this mission. Riley unstrapped her helmet and surveyed the scene. The silence was the first thing that struck her, no voices calling for help, no machinery humming, no rescue teams coordinating. Just the occasional groan of settling concrete and the whisper of dust falling through cracks. She grabbed her radio and equipment bag from the helicopter. The portable radio unit felt heavier than usual as she slung it over her shoulder. Operations, this is Angel 1 on site. Beginning initial assessment. Martinez's voice crackled through immediately. Copy, Angel 1. What's your visual? Riley walked toward the collapsed building, her boots crunching on debris. Sir, I'm looking at what appears to be a pancake collapse. Multiple floors compressed down to maybe 10 feet of space. The damage extends beyond the building footprint. She paused at what used to be the main entrance. A concrete slab the size of a small car blocked the doorway. But something caught her eye, scorch marks on the surrounding walls. Operations, I'm seeing blast patterns on the exterior walls. Are we sure this was a structural failure? Static filled the radio for several seconds. Angel 1, focus on the recovery mission. Document what you see, but don't speculate on causes. Riley frowned. In 12 years of flying, she'd never been told not to report her observations accurately. She moved around the building's perimeter, photographing the damage with her helmet camera. The destruction was massive, but it followed a pattern that didn't match foundation failure. The debris field spread outward from the center, not downward from weak supports. At the building's north side, she found something that made her stop cold. Personal gear scattered in the rubble, more than 3 soldiers would carry. She counted at least 6 different backpacks, multiple helmets, and what looked like parts of a communications array. Riley keyed her radio. Operations, I'm finding equipment for more than 3 personnel. How many soldiers were actually in this building? The response came too quickly. 3 confirmed, Shaw, Martinez, Johnson, and Williams. Stick to the mission parameters. She photographed everything anyway. Among the scattered gear, she spotted a dog tag half buried under a chunk of concrete. She worked it free and read the name, Peterson, Michael J. That wasn't one of the 3 names she'd been given. This doesn't add up, she muttered, slipping the tag into her pocket. Riley continued her circuit of the building. The western side showed the least damage, and she could see into what had been the ground floor. Training equipment lay twisted and broken, urban combat simulators, computer terminals, and something that looked like sophisticated monitoring equipment. This wasn't just a training exercise. This looked like a testing facility. She was photographing the interior when she heard it. Faint, almost lost in the ambient noise of settling rubble, but unmistakable. A voice. Riley froze, straining to listen. There it was again, someone calling for help from beneath the wreckage. Her heart rate spiked. Hello? Can anyone hear me? Silence stretched for 30 seconds. Then, clearer this time, help! We're trapped down here. Riley's training kicked in immediately. She grabbed her portable radio and switched to the emergency frequency. Operations, this is Angel 1. I have survivors at the site. Repeat, I have confirmed survivors calling for help from beneath the debris. The response was sharp and immediate. Negative, Angel 1. You are mistaken. No survivors are possible given the extent of the collapse. Riley stared at her radio in disbelief. Sir, I can hear voices. Multiple personnel are alive down there. Shaw, you're hearing echoes or wind through the debris. Proceed with body recovery as ordered. Riley felt anger building in her chest. She'd been in enough combat zones to know the difference between voices and wind. She moved closer to where the sound had come from and called out again. If you can hear me, make noise. Bang on something. 3 distinct metallic clangs echoed up from the rubble. Then a voice, stronger now, we're here. 3 of us. Sergeant Martinez is hurt bad. Riley's mind raced. Those were the names from her briefing, but they were supposed to be dead. She looked around the site with new eyes. No other response teams. No investigation crew. No emergency services. Someone wanted these soldiers to stay buried. She keyed her radio one more time. Operations, I have definitive proof of survivors. I'm switching to search and rescue protocols. Negative. Martinez's voice cut through the static. Angel 1, you are ordered to maintain distance from the structure. Any vibration from your aircraft could cause total collapse. Do not approach the building. Riley looked at her Black Hawk, then at the rubble where 3 soldiers waited for rescue. The helicopter's rotor wash would definitely destabilize the wreckage. But leaving wasn't an option. She made her decision. Operations, I'm shutting down engines and proceeding on foot. These soldiers are alive, and I'm going to get them out. Shaw, that's a direct order. Return to base immediately. Riley reached for her radio's power switch, then hesitated. In her 12 years of service, she'd never disobeyed a direct order. But she'd also never been ordered to abandon living soldiers. She clicked off the radio. Moving carefully around the debris field, Riley searched for the strongest voice signals. The sound seemed to come from the building's northeast corner, where a small gap existed between two large concrete slabs. "Can you hear me?" she called into the opening. "Yes. We're about 15 feet down. There's a pocket of space, but Martinez is bleeding bad and water's starting to come in." Water. That meant a burst pipe, and rising water levels would either drown them or destruct the air pocket keeping them alive. Riley assessed the situation. The concrete slabs above the survivors formed a precarious balance. Her helicopter's downwash would definitely collapse the structure, probably killing everyone below. But there had to be another way. She studied the surrounding buildings. The urban warfare facility was designed as a connected complex. If the original blueprints were accurate, utility tunnels should run between the structures. Riley grabbed her equipment bag and started toward the adjacent building. She'd need to find another route to reach the survivors, one that didn't require her helicopter. Behind her, the radio crackled with increasingly urgent calls from operations, demanding her response. She ignored them all. 3 soldiers were counting on her. Everything else was just noise. As she reached the next building's entrance, she heard the voice again, fainter now but still audible. "Please don't leave us down here." Riley checked her watch. If water was entering their space, time was running out fast. She needed to find those tunnels, and she needed to find them now. But what Riley discovered next would reveal that this rescue mission was far more complicated than she'd imagined, and the stakes were higher than 3 lives. Riley found the maintenance access to Building 6 unlocked. She pushed through the heavy steel door and into the mechanical corridor that ran beneath the training complex. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down the concrete tunnel, and the air smelled of dust and machine oil. She pulled out her portable radio and adjusted the frequency to the emergency band. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is Major Shaw with Search and Rescue." The response came immediately, clearer now through the underground acoustics. "Major Shaw. Thank God. This is Sergeant Martinez. We're trapped about 50 feet northeast of your position." Riley felt relief flood through her. The voice was strong, coherent. "Martinez, how many of you are down there?" "3 of us, ma'am. Corporal Johnson and Private Williams are with me. Johnson's trapped under some debris, and I've got a pretty bad head injury. Williams is mobile but shaken up." Riley pulled out her notebook and sketched the tunnel layout as she walked. "How long have you been trapped?" "Since about 0630 hours, ma'am. The whole building came down on us during the exercise." Riley stopped walking. That was 8 hours ago, not too like operations had told her. "Martinez, what kind of exercise were you running?" Static filled the radio for a moment. "Then, ma'am, we were testing some new urban combat systems. High-tech stuff. Computer simulations, advanced targeting equipment." "How many personnel were in the building when it collapsed?" Another pause. "Ma'am, I count 3 of us alive down here. But there were at least 6 guys in the building when everything went sideways." Riley's jaw tightened. 6 personnel. She'd found evidence of more scattered equipment, and now Martinez was confirming her suspicions. "Martinez, I'm going to find a way to reach you. What's your immediate situation?" "We're in what used to be the basement level, ma'am. There's a pocket of space about 10 feet square. The good news is the concrete slabs above us are holding steady. Bad news is water's been seeping in for the last couple hours." "How much water?" "Started at our ankles this morning. It's up to our knees now." Riley calculated quickly. If water was rising that fast, they had maybe 4 hours before the space became unlivable. "What about injuries?" "I took a hit to the head when the ceiling came down. Been dizzy and nauseous. Johnson's got his leg pinned under a chunk of concrete. He's conscious but in serious pain. Williams has some cuts and bruises but he's functional." Riley found a junction in the tunnel where it branched toward Building 7. The walls here showed cracks from the collapse above. "Martinez, I need you to stay calm and help me figure out how to reach you. Are you in a basement room or just a debris pocket? It was the equipment testing lab, ma'am. Reinforced concrete walls, which probably saved our lives. But the entrance is completely blocked. Riley studied the tunnel walls. According to the building schematics she'd memorized during training, these utility corridors connected all the buildings in the complex. Is there any other way out of that room? Ventilation shafts, maintenance access? William's voice came over the radio, younger and more frightened than Martinez. Ma'am, there's a ventilation grate in the east wall, but it's only about 2 feet square. That might work. Can you see daylight through it? No ma'am, but there's air moving through it. Riley marked her position on her crude map. If the ventilation system was intact, it might connect to the main utility tunnel. Okay, I'm going to work my way toward you through the tunnel system. Keep talking to me so I can triangulate your position. Yes ma'am. Major Shaw? Go ahead, Martinez. Ma'am, there's something you need to know about what happened here. This wasn't just a building collapse. Riley stopped walking. What do you mean? The equipment we were testing, it was some kind of automated urban warfare system. Drones, smart weapons, computer-controlled targeting. During the test, something malfunctioned. The system started targeting us instead of the simulated enemies. Riley felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying the building collapsed because the system malfunctioned? Not exactly, ma'am. We had to use explosives to disable the system before it killed us all. That's what brought the building down. The pieces were falling into place. No wonder operations wanted this treated as a simple recovery mission. An experimental weapons system had gone rogue and nearly killed its own operators. Martinez, who else knows about this? Just us 3, ma'am. And whoever sent you to recover our bodies instead of rescuing us. Riley reached a T-junction in the tunnel. To her left, the passage continued toward Building 7. To her right, it sloped upward toward what looked like a ventilation shaft. I'm going to check the ventilation route first. Keep talking so I don't lose your signal. She climbed the sloping passage, her equipment bag scraping against the concrete walls. The air grew staler as she climbed, and she could hear the sound of dripping water ahead. Major Shaw, the water level just jumped up another inch, Williams called through the radio. It's coming in faster now. Riley reached the ventilation shaft junction. Multiple ducts branched off in different directions, but she could hear voices echoing from the northeast branch. I think I'm close to you. Martinez, have Williams bang on the wall next to that ventilation grate. The metallic clanging echoed through the ductwork, much louder now. That's you. I'm maybe 20 feet away. Riley examined the ductwork. The main shaft was large enough for her to crawl through, but barely. Okay, here's the situation. I can reach you through the ventilation system, but it's going to be tight. And once I'm down there with you, we'll need to figure out how to get everyone back up through this route. Ma'am, Johnson can't move his leg. The concrete has it pinned pretty good. Riley took a deep breath. She'd performed rescues before, but never anything this complex. One problem at a time. First, I need to assess Johnson's injury and see if we can free him. Then we'll work on extraction. She unloaded most of her equipment in the tunnel, keeping only essential medical supplies and her radio. Martinez, I'm coming down. The water situation is going to get worse before it gets better, so we need to work fast. Yes, ma'am. We're ready. Riley squeezed into the ventilation shaft and began crawling toward the voices. The metal ductwork groaned under her weight, and she could smell the musty air of the flooded basement ahead. As she crawled, she keyed her radio one more time to check in with the survivors. How are you holding up down there? Martinez's voice was getting weaker. Johnson's in pretty bad shape, ma'am. And the water just hit our waists. Riley crawled faster. If the water kept rising at this rate, they'd be underwater in 2 hours. Behind her, she could hear her main radio crackling with urgent calls from operations, demanding her location and status. She'd ignored them for over an hour now. By the time this was over, she'd either be a hero or facing a court-martial. Right now, she didn't care which. 3 soldiers were depending on her, and she wasn't going to let them down. As Riley neared the end of the ventilation shaft, she could see the faint outline of the trapped survivors below, and the rising water that threatened to turn their rescue into a recovery mission. Riley reached the end of the ventilation shaft and peered down through the metal grate. 15 feet below, she could see 3 figures huddled in murky water that reflected the emergency lighting from her flashlight. "Martinez, I can see you. How's everyone doing?" Sergeant Martinez looked up, his face pale but alert. "Johnson's conscious but his legs still pinned. Williams is helping keep his head above water." Riley assessed the situation quickly. The basement room was maybe 12 feet square, filled with twisted metal and concrete debris. Water covered the floor to chest level on the men, and it was still rising. "I'm going to drop some medical supplies down to you, then we need to talk about getting out of here." She lowered her medical kit on a rope, watching as Williams caught it and passed it to Martinez. "Martinez, I need you to focus on Johnson's leg while I work out our exit strategy. The ventilation shaft I came through won't work for an injured man." Riley pulled out her notebook and sketched what she'd seen in the tunnels. The utility system connected all the buildings, but most passages were too narrow for evacuation. However, she remembered seeing a wider maintenance corridor that ran parallel to the main tunnels. "Williams, can you see any other openings in that room? Maybe where pipes or cables enter the walls?" Private Williams waited around the perimeter, his flashlight beam dancing across the flooded surfaces. "Ma'am, there's a big opening in the west wall where some pipes come through. Looks like it connects to something bigger." Riley studied her rough map. The west wall would connect to the main utility corridor that ran between buildings 6 and 7. If that passage was clear, it might be their way out. "I'm going back up to check that route. Keep working on Johnson's leg, but don't try to move him yet. We need a clear exit before we risk making his injury worse." Riley crawled backward through the ventilation shaft, her muscles aching from the confined space. Back in the main tunnel, she followed her map toward the western maintenance corridor. The passage was larger than the others, about 4 feet high and 3 feet wide. Emergency lighting ran along the ceiling, and she could see it extended toward Building 7. More importantly, the floor was dry. Riley called ahead as she moved through the corridor, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Martinez, can you hear me?" His response came through the walls, muffled but audible. "Yes, ma'am, you sound closer. I think I found our route. There should be an opening in your west wall where the utility pipes come through." She reached what appeared to be the junction point. A large rectangular opening in the tunnel wall showed where pipes and electrical conduits passed through to the collapsed building. But the opening was partially blocked with debris from the collapse above. Riley examined the obstruction. Chunks of concrete and twisted rebar had fallen into the passage, but she could see a gap near the top that might be big enough for a person to squeeze through. "Williams, go to that pipe opening in the west wall. Do you see any light?" "Yes, ma'am. I can see your flashlight." Riley felt a surge of hope. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. This passage connects to the main tunnel system. It's our way out, but I need to clear some debris first." She began moving the smaller chunks of concrete, stacking them to one side. The work was slow and careful. Any loud noise or vibration might destabilize the rubble above and cause another collapse. After 20 minutes of careful work, she'd opened a gap about 3 feet square. Tight, but manageable for getting the injured soldiers through. "Martinez, how's Johnson's leg?" "I've got the bleeding stopped and splinted it with some debris. But he's going to need help moving." Riley crawled partway through the opening to assess the situation from the other side. The basement room was now chest deep in water, and all 3 men looked exhausted. "Here's the plan. Williams comes through first, then we work together to get Johnson out. Martinez, you come last to make sure we don't leave anything behind." She secured a rope to the pipe opening to help them climb up to the tunnel level. "Williams, grab that medical kit and anything else we need. Leave everything else. Private Williams swam toward the opening, the medical kit held above his head. Riley helped pull him up through the gap, and he collapsed on the tunnel floor, breathing hard. You did good, Williams. How are you feeling? Better now that I'm out of that water, ma'am. But Johnson's in bad shape. That leg is really messed up. Riley handed him a spare flashlight and her notebook. I need you to memorize this route back to the surface. If something happens to me, you get Johnson and Martinez out of here. Ma'am, nothing's going to happen to you. Riley smiled grimly. Let's hope not. But we need to be ready for anything. She crawled back through the opening to help with Johnson. The water level had risen another few inches while she'd been gone. Martinez, we need to move fast. The water's not going to stop rising. Understood, ma'am. Johnson, you ready for this? Corporal Johnson's face was gray with pain, but he nodded. Let's get out of here. Moving an injured man through a debris-filled opening while chest-deep in water was one of the most difficult things Riley had ever attempted. Johnson gritted his teeth as they maneuvered his splinted leg through the gap, with Martinez pushing from below and Williams pulling from above. It took 15 minutes, but they finally got Johnson into the tunnel where he could rest on dry ground. Martinez, your turn. Make it quick. As Martinez climbed through the opening, Riley took one last look at the flooded basement. In a few more hours, this space would be completely underwater. If she hadn't ignored her orders and searched for survivors, 3 good soldiers would have drowned down here while everyone above thought they were already dead. The thought made her angry all over again. Martinez collapsed next to Johnson in the tunnel, both men exhausted but alive. Okay, gentlemen, we're not done yet. We still need to get out of this tunnel system and get Johnson to a medical facility. Riley checked her watch. They'd been underground for over 2 hours. By now, operations probably had search teams looking for her helicopter. Williams, you take point with the map. Martinez, help me carry Johnson. We move slow and steady, no rushing, no noise that might cause more collapses. As they began the long journey back through the tunnels, Johnson grabbed Riley's arm. Ma'am, why did you come back for us? Your orders were body recovery, right? Riley looked at the 3 soldiers, injured, exhausted, but alive because she'd chosen to disobey direct orders. Because leaving soldiers behind isn't an option. Not for me. Martinez managed a weak smile. Ma'am, when we get out of here, there's going to be a lot of explaining to do. This whole operation was classified, and people are going to want to know how we survived. Riley shouldered more of Johnson's weight as they moved through the tunnel. Let me worry about the explaining. You just focus on getting home. But as they made their way toward the surface, Riley knew Martinez was right. This rescue was going to raise questions that someone didn't want answered. The experimental weapons system, the cover-up, the order to abandon living soldiers, all of it pointed to something much bigger than a training accident. As they climbed toward daylight, Riley realized that saving these 3 men was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Riley pushed through the tunnel system with Martinez beside her, supporting Johnson between them. The emergency lighting flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows on wet concrete walls. Every step sent ripples through the ankle-deep water that had followed them from the collapsed building. How much further? Martinez asked, breathing hard from Johnson's weight. Williams checked his crude map by flashlight. Should be close. I can feel air movement from ahead. Riley glanced at her watch. They'd been underground for 3 hours. Above them, the building's remains continued settling with occasional groans and crashes. Water's getting deeper, Johnson observed through gritted teeth. His improvised leg splint scraped against the tunnel wall. Riley looked down. He was right. The water had risen to mid-calf level, and she could hear it rushing faster through the connecting passages. Main water line must have burst somewhere, she said. We need to move faster. They pressed forward, but the tunnel curved sharply to the left, and Riley realized they were going in circles. Williams, check that map again. Ma'am, I think we took a wrong turn back at the junction. This passage doesn't lead to the surface. Riley felt her stomach drop. They were lost in a flooding underground maze, with an injured man and no clear exit route. A distant rumble echoed through the tunnels, different from the building settling. Thunder. Storm's moving in, Martinez said. If this connects to surface drains, we're about to have a lot more water down here. Riley made a decision. Williams, backtrack to that junction. Find the right passage. Martinez and I will stay with Johnson. Ma'am, I don't want to leave you. That's an order. We need someone mobile to scout ahead. Williams nodded and splashed back the way they'd come, his flashlight beam disappearing around the corner. Johnson's breathing was getting labored. Major, my leg's going numb. Can't feel anything below the knee. Riley checked his pulse. Too fast, too weak. We're going to get you out of here, Johnson. Just hold on. The radio crackled with static. Riley tried calling operations but got only dead air. They were too deep underground for reliable communication. Martinez, how are you holding up? I'm good, ma'am. Just worried about Williams finding the right way. As if summoned by his words, Williams' voice echoed from the darkness ahead. Found it. Main tunnel's about 50 yards back, then straight up to the surface. Riley felt relief flood through her. You heard him. Let's move. They retraced their steps, the water now reaching their knees. The current was stronger, making it harder to maintain footing on the slippery concrete. At the junction, Williams waited with better news. The exit tunnel's dry, and I can see daylight at the top. The passage sloped upward at a steep angle. Riley and Martinez took turns carrying Johnson, their muscles burning from the effort. Behind them, water continued rising in the lower tunnels. Almost there, Riley panted. Williams, radio for medical evacuation as soon as we reach the surface. They emerged into gray daylight and driving rain. The storm had arrived with violent winds that whipped debris across the training facility grounds. Riley's Black Hawk sat undamaged in the landing zone, but the weather was deteriorating fast. Operations, this is Angel 1. I have 3 survivors extracted and need immediate medical evacuation. Colonel Martinez's voice came through clearly, anger evident. Shaw, where the hell have you been? We've had search teams looking for you for hours. Sir, I found the missing personnel alive and extracted them through the tunnel system. Corporal Johnson needs immediate medical attention. A long pause. Stand by, Angel 1. Riley helped Martinez get Johnson into the helicopter's cabin while Williams gathered their remaining gear. The injured soldier was pale and shivering, but conscious. Ma'am, Johnson said weakly, you saved our lives down there. We won't forget that. Riley squeezed his shoulder. Just doing my job. But even as she said it, she knew that wasn't entirely true. Her job had been body recovery. Everything else had been her own choice. The radio crackled again. Angel 1, return to base immediately for debriefing. Medical team will meet you at the landing pad. Copy that, operations. Riley started the engines and lifted off into the storm. Through the rain-streaked windscreen, she could see the collapsed building shrinking below them. In a few more hours, the underground tunnels would be completely flooded. If she had followed her original orders, 3 good soldiers would have drowned while everyone above ground believed they were already dead. Martinez leaned forward from the passenger seat. Ma'am, what happens now? They're going to want to know how we survived, and why you disobeyed direct orders. Riley checked her instruments and adjusted course for base. I'll handle the questions. You 3 just focus on recovery. But she knew Martinez was right. This rescue had exposed something that someone had wanted to keep buried. The experimental weapons system, the cover-up, the order to abandon living soldiers, it all pointed to a conspiracy that went far beyond a simple training accident. As Fort Braxton came into view through the storm, Riley made another decision. She wasn't going to let this go. Those 3 soldiers deserved the truth, and so did the families of whoever else had died in that building. The hardest part of her mission was just beginning. But first, she had to get her men home safely, and then face the consequences of choosing to save lives over following orders. The landing pad at Fort Braxton was a hive of activity despite the storm. Riley brought the Black Hawk down through driving rain, fighting crosswinds that tried to push her off course. Through the cockpit windows, she could see ambulances waiting with their red lights flashing. "Hold on, Johnson." Almost there, she called over the engine noise. As soon as the skids touched concrete, the medical team rushed forward. Riley shut down the engines and jumped out to help transfer Johnson to the stretcher. His color was better, but he needed real medical attention fast. "Corporal Johnson, combat injury to the left leg with possible circulation compromise," Riley briefed the lead medic. "He's been stable for the last hour but needs x-rays and probably surgery." "We've got him, Major." "Good work." Martinez and Williams climbed out under their own power, both exhausted but walking. Riley watched the ambulance drive away with Johnson, feeling the weight of the last 4 hours settle on her shoulders. "Shaw." Colonel Martinez's voice cut through the rain. He approached with 2 other officers Riley didn't recognize. "My office." "Now." "Sir, I need to secure my aircraft first." "Mills can handle that." "Move." Riley followed the colonel across the tarmac, Martinez and Williams flanking her. The storm was getting worse, with lightning illuminating the dark clouds overhead. Inside the operations building, Colonel Martinez led them to a conference room where Captain Hayes waited with a stack of files and a digital recorder. "Sit down, all of you," the colonel ordered. "This debriefing is being recorded for the official record." Riley remained standing. "Sir, before we begin, I want to know why these soldiers were written off as dead when they were clearly alive." "Major Shaw, you disobeyed direct orders and endangered your own life for what should have been a routine recovery mission." "Routine?" Riley's voice rose. "Sir, those men were trapped for 8 hours before I was even dispatched." 8 hours? How is that routine?" Hayes leaned forward. "Major, the structural engineers determined that rescue operations were impossible. Your actions could have caused a secondary collapse." Martinez spoke up from his chair. "Ma'am, with respect, there was no structural analysis. We were left to die down there." Colonel Martinez turned to face the sergeant. "That's enough, soldier. You'll speak when spoken to." Riley stepped between them. "Sir, Sergeant Martinez is telling the truth. There were 6 personnel in that building, not 3. I found evidence of experimental weapons testing, and these men told me the collapse was caused by a system malfunction that forced them to use explosives." The room went silent except for the rain beating against the windows. Hayes reached for the recorder. "Major Shaw, you're making serious allegations without proof." Riley pulled the dog tag from her pocket and placed it on the table. "Peterson, Michael J. This was in the debris field." "Where's his body, Captain?" Colonel Martinez picked up the tag, his expression unreadable. "Where did you find this?" "Scattered with equipment from at least 6 different soldiers." "Sir, someone classified this as a training accident to cover up what really happened." Williams cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, Major Shaw saved our lives. When the experimental system went rogue, it started targeting friendlies. We had to destroy it before it killed us all." Hayes shut off the recorder abruptly. "This conversation is over. Major Shaw, you're confined to quarters pending investigation." "Like hell I am." Riley faced Colonel Martinez directly. "Sir, I've served under you for 3 years. You know I don't make things up. Those tunnels are flooded now, but there's evidence throughout that facility that proves this wasn't a simple building collapse." Colonel Martinez studied the dog tag for a long moment. When he looked up, something had changed in his expression. "Hayes, step outside." "Sir, I don't think." "That wasn't a request, Captain." Hayes gathered her files and left, closing the door harder than necessary. Colonel Martinez sat down heavily. Shaw, what you're describing sounds like the Phoenix Project. It was supposed to be a demonstration of automated urban warfare systems. Supposed to be? The test was scheduled for next week. If it went live early with personnel in the target zone. He trailed off, the implications clear. Martinez spoke up. Sir, the system activated without warning. Started tracking us as enemy combatants. We barely had time to set charges and blow the control room before it got us all. Colonel Martinez was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he picked up his phone. Get me General Harrison at Pentagon. Priority 1. While they waited for the call to connect, Riley looked at the 3 soldiers she'd rescued. Martinez was alert despite his head injury. Williams had stopped shaking and was sitting straighter. Johnson was in surgery but alive. Shaw, Colonel Martinez said, covering the phone. What you did today, ignoring orders, risking your life for these men, that's either going to make you a hero or end your career. I don't care which, sir. It was the right thing to do. He smiled for the first time since she'd known him. General Harrison? Colonel Martinez at Braxton. We have a situation with the Phoenix Project that requires immediate attention. Riley listened as her commanding officer explained the real events at the training facility. The cover-up, the abandoned soldiers, the experimental weapons system that had malfunctioned and nearly killed its own operators. When he finished the call, Colonel Martinez looked at Riley with something approaching respect. General Harrison is sending an investigation team from Washington. You'll be asked to testify about everything you saw and heard today. Yes, sir. What about Martinez, Johnson, and Williams? They'll be protected witnesses. Their testimony about the Phoenix Project malfunction is going to prevent this system from being deployed until it's completely redesigned. Riley felt a weight lift from her shoulders. So no court-martial for disobeying orders? Colonel Martinez stood and extended his hand. Shaw, you saved 3 lives today and exposed a cover-up that could have gotten more soldiers killed. That's not something we punish. That's something we reward. Riley shook his hand, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion of the day. Sir, there's one more thing. The families of the soldiers who didn't make it, Peterson and the others, they deserve to know the truth about what happened. They will. I give you my word. As Riley walked back toward her quarters through the storm, she thought about the choice she'd made in that flooded tunnel. Following orders versus saving lives. Sometimes the right decision wasn't the easy one. Her radio crackled with a message from the medical center. Johnson was out of surgery and stable. His leg would heal completely. Riley looked back at the operations building where Martinez and Williams were still giving their statements. 3 good soldiers who would go home to their families because she'd chosen to listen to her conscience instead of her radio. That was worth any risk she'd taken. As the storm cleared over Fort Braxton, Riley Shaw had become more than just a rescue pilot. She'd become proof that sometimes the most important orders are the ones you give yourself. If this story of military heroism and moral courage resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more inspiring military stories.